Rain turned the Mississippi back road into a black river, and Colton Drake almost drove past the body. But his German shepherd Shadow rose on his hind legs in the passenger seat and pressed his front paws together like hands in prayer. Colton had seen Shadow do that exactly twice before. Both times, someone was dying. He pulled over. A woman lay crumpled in the ditch, blood mixing with mud, an FBI badge spilling from her jacket. Her eyes opened just long enough to whisper 5 words that changed everything. "Don't call 911. They're listening." Before we continue, tell me where you're watching from tonight. And if this story grips your heart, please like and subscribe, and stay with me until the very end. Colton Drake killed the engine and was out of the truck before the headlights stopped shaking. The rain hit him like a wall. Warm, heavy Gulf Coast rain that smelled like salt and rust, and something he couldn't name yet. Something wrong. Shadow hit the ground beside him and moved fast. Not running wild, but cutting straight to the woman in the ditch with the precision of a dog who had been trained to find what the world tried to hide. His tan and black coat went dark with rain in seconds, but his eyes stayed locked, burning with focus. Colton dropped to his knees in the mud. His navy uniform soaked through instantly, the digital green and brown camouflage of his NWU Type 3 turning heavy against his skin. He didn't care. He'd been wet before. He'd been cold, shot at, buried under rubble. But he had never found a dying woman on a back road at midnight with his dog praying beside her. "Hey!" He pressed 2 fingers to her neck. Pulse weak, fast, thready. "Stay with me." Her eyes opened again. Green, sharp, fighting hard against the dark pulling her under. She grabbed his wrist with a grip that surprised him. Thin fingers, but iron underneath. "No hospitals," she said. Her voice was a ragged whisper, each word costing her something she couldn't afford. "They'll finish it." "Who?" Colton was already pulling his field kit from the cargo pocket of his pants. Gauze, pressure bandage, tourniquet. His hands moved from memory. 12 years of training didn't ask permission. It just worked. "Magnolia," she breathed. Then her eyes rolled back, and her grip went limp. Colton found the wound fast. Left side, below the ribs. Entry and exit. A gunshot. Clean, deliberate, close range. Not a mugging, not a random act. Someone had aimed at this woman and pulled the trigger with the full intention of watching her die alone in a Mississippi ditch. Shadow stood over her body like a sentry. His ears pinned forward, his muzzle lifted, scanning the darkness. Then he did it again. Rose on his hind legs, front paws pressed together, trembling with the effort. The prayer. Colton's throat tightened. He'd raised this dog from 8 weeks old, trained him through hell and hurricanes. Shadow didn't beg. Shadow didn't perform. If Shadow pressed his paws together, it meant the same thing it had meant in Djibouti when their team leader was bleeding out under a collapsed wall. It meant, hurry, or we lose this one. "I hear you, buddy." Colton packed the wound, wrapped it tight, stripped off his own jacket, and pressed it against her side. The rain made everything slippery. Blood, mud, fabric. His hands moved anyway. He checked the ditch. Her car was 20 feet back, crumpled against a drainage culvert. The driver's side was caved in at a hard angle that wasn't consistent with losing control. Someone had hit her, rammed her off the road at speed, then finished the job with a bullet. Tire marks on the asphalt. Wide, commercial. Not a car, a truck. "Okay," Colton said to himself, voice low and steady. "Okay." He lifted her. She was lighter than he expected, all lean muscle and adrenaline-burned fat. the body of someone who'd been running on stress and mission fuel for months. Shadow stayed tight at his heel as Colton carried her to his truck and laid her across the back seat. Her jacket fell open. That's when he saw the badge wallet. FBI, Special Agent. And clipped inside, a small waterproof case taped against the lining with medical tape. Whoever she was, she'd expected trouble. She'd prepared for the worst, and the worst had come anyway. Colton left the case alone. Not his business yet. Keeping her alive was his business. He climbed behind the wheel. Shadow jumped in, took position in the passenger seat, and fixed his gaze on the rear-view mirror, watching the road behind them. Always behind. Colton drove. No sirens, no calls, no GPS. He pulled the battery from his personal phone and dropped it in the center console. If someone was monitoring emergency channels, they'd be listening for exactly this: a 911 call about a gunshot victim on Route 49. He wasn't going to give them that. His grandfather's fishing camp was 40 minutes south, deep in the bayou, down a dirt track that flooded every spring and disappeared from every map that had ever tried to include it. No electricity, no cell signal, no neighbors. The kind of place where a man could disappear or save a life without the world knowing either way. The woman moaned in the back seat. Colton adjusted the mirror. Her face was pale under the dome light, pain carved deep into her features. Auburn hair matted with blood and rain. She looked like someone who had been fighting alone for a very long time. "What's your name?" he asked, not expecting an answer. "Sloan." It came out broken. "Merritt." "Sloan, I'm Colton, Navy. I've got your wound packed. You're going to make it, but I need you to stay awake." "How bad?" she whispered. "Through and through. You're lucky." A weak, bitter sound escaped her lips. Something that might have been a laugh if she'd had the strength. "Lucky left town about 8 months ago." Shadow whined once, soft and low, then pressed his nose against the gap between the seats, stretching toward Sloan like he could hold her in the world by proximity alone. "Your dog," Sloan murmured. "He was standing up, like he was praying," Colton said. "Yeah, he does that." Silence for a mile. Rain hammered the roof. The wipers fought a losing war. Then Sloan spoke again, her voice thin as wire. "The case, inside my jacket, left side." "I saw it. Micro SD card. 8 months of evidence. Human trafficking. Gulf Coast corridor." She coughed, and the sound was wet and ugly. "A company called Magnolia Freight. They're moving people, Colton. Women. Children. Through the port, by truck, inland." Colton's jaw locked. His knuckles whitened on the steering wheel. He'd seen trafficking overseas. He'd kicked in doors and found rooms that would haunt him until his last breath. The idea that it was happening here, on American roads, under American company logos, hit him somewhere deeper than combat ever had. "Who shot you?" he asked. "I don't know his face, but I know who gave the order." Sloan's breathing quickened, pain and fury fighting for control. "Chief Warrant Officer Ray Hobbs, Navy Logistics. He coordinates the routes, uses military supply channels as cover." Colton's foot almost came off the gas. "Navy?" "Your Navy." Sloan's eyes found his in the mirror. "He operates out of Stennis. He has contacts in the local sheriff's department. Maybe on base, too. My cover got blown 48 hours ago. I was running to a secure relay point when they hit me." Colton processed it. A corrupt military officer. Trafficking. Compromised law enforcement. An FBI agent shot and left to die. This wasn't a crime. This was a war, and he just walked into it by stopping for a dog's prayer on a rain-soaked road. "Why can't you call your own people?" he asked. "Because someone in my field office sold me out." Sloane's voice cracked, and for the first time he heard something underneath the toughness. Betrayal. The kind that doesn't just wound your body. The kind that poisons your ability to trust anyone ever again. "I reported to 3 people. One of them gave Hobbs my identity, my route, my timeline. I don't know which one." Shadow growled. Low, deep, a sound that vibrated through the truck like a bass note. His eyes were fixed on the side mirror. Colton checked it. Headlights. Far back, but there, holding distance, matching speed. "We've got company," Colton said quietly. Sloane tried to sit up and gasped. "How far?" "Half mile. Hanging back. They're tracking, not chasing." "If they were tracking my phone, it's in the car. I left it." "Then they're tracking something else." Colton's mind raced. The car. If someone had found the wreck, found it empty, no body in the ditch, they'd know she was picked up. They'd check the road, check the direction. Route 49 only went 2 ways. He killed his headlights. The road ahead vanished into black. Rain swallowed everything. Colton drove by feel, by the ghost memory of a road he'd traveled since childhood, counting fence posts and drainage bridges in his head. Shadow pressed against the dashboard, ears forward, navigating by something deeper than sight. A quarter-mile ahead, Colton felt the dirt track before he saw it. He turned hard, no signal, no brake lights, the truck lurching off asphalt onto mud and gravel. Branches scraped the roof, water splashed the undercarriage. The bayou closed around them like a fist. He watched the mirror. The headlights on Route 49 passed the turnoff without slowing, kept going, kept hunting. Colton let out a breath he didn't know he'd been holding. Sloane's voice came from the back seat, barely audible. "Colton." "Yeah?" "That card has 40 victims on it. Names, dates, drop locations. If Hobbs gets it back, those people disappear forever." She paused, and when she spoke again, her voice held something that wasn't fear. It was duty, the kind that kept people crawling when their legs were broken. "I'd rather die in this truck than let him erase them." Colton didn't answer right away. He stared at the flooded dirt road ahead, the bayou pressing in on both sides, the rain falling like the sky itself was grieving. Then he said it, simple, final, the way a man speaks when he's already decided. "Nobody's dying in this truck tonight." Shadow pressed his paws together one more time, brief, quiet, like an amen that didn't need a church. Sloane's cracked phone lit up on the seat beside her. A text from an unknown number glowed in the darkness. "Confirm the asset is neutralized." Someone was waiting for confirmation that Sloane Merritt was dead. And when that confirmation didn't come, whoever sent that message would know she was still alive. And they would come looking with everything they had. Colton stared at the screen. Shadow stared at the darkness. And the bayou swallowed the truck whole as the dirt road disappeared behind them like a secret the earth decided to keep. The fishing camp smelled like old wood and kerosene and the kind of silence that only exists where people haven't been for a long time. Colton kicked the door open with his boot, carried Sloane inside, and set her down on the cot before his arms gave out. She was unconscious again. Her breathing had turned shallow, each inhale a small war her body was fighting without her permission. Shadow swept the cabin before Colton could tell him to. Nose to the floor, corners first, then the door, then back to Sloane. He circled her once and lay down beside the cot, pressing his body against the frame like he could hold her to the earth by weight alone. Colton lit the kerosene lantern. His hands were steady. His mind was not. He stripped the soaked bandage, cleaned the wound again with bottled water, and the last of his field antiseptic, then repacked it tight. The bleeding had slowed, not stopped, but slowed. Through and through was good. No bullet lodged inside, no fragments. But infection would come fast in this humidity, and she'd already lost enough blood to make her skin look like wax paper. "Sloane," he tapped her cheek. "Wake up." Her eyes opened, unfocused, then sharp. That was the thing about her. Even half dead, her eyes came back fighting. "Where are we?" she asked. "Off the map. My grandfather's place. No power, no signal, no address. Nobody's finding us tonight." "You sure about that?" Colton paused. He wasn't sure. He was trained, not psychic, but he pulled the truck under cypress cover, killed every light, and driven the last 2 miles with his headlights off through water deep enough to erase tire tracks. That was the best he could do with what he had. "Sure enough," he said. Sloane tried to push herself up. Pain hit her like a fist, and she collapsed back, teeth clenched so hard Colton heard them grind. "The card," she managed. "Did you—" "It's in my pocket. Hasn't left my body. Don't plug it into anything connected to a network. The files are raw, unencrypted. If Hobbs has anyone monitoring data traffic, I know how operational security works." Her eyes found his. Something shifted in them. Not trust, not yet, but recognition. The look one soldier gives another when they realize they speak the same language. "You said you're a SEAL," she said. "Canine handler, tactical instructor. I was finishing a rotation at Stennis." Stennis. The word came out like poison. "That's where Hobbs operates." "Yeah, I heard you the first time." Colton sat back on his heels. "I've been on that base for 2 weeks. Walked past 100 people. Any one of them could be part of this." "Probably were." Sloane closed her eyes, and for a moment she looked like someone who had been carrying a weight so long she'd forgotten what standing straight felt like. 8 months, Colton. I've been under for 8 months. I built a cover, got close to the drivers, the dispatchers. I mapped every route, every drop, every shell company Magnolia uses to wash the money. And someone inside the bureau burned you. 3 people knew my identity. My handler, the assistant field director, and a liaison at DOJ. Her voice hardened. 48 hours after I filed my last progress report, a Magnolia truck ran me off the road, and a man I'd never seen walked up to my window and shot me like I was a dog on the highway. Shadow lifted his head at the word. His ears twitched. Colton put a hand on the dog's neck. "Easy." "How'd you survive?" Colton asked. "I played dead. He fired once. I slumped. He didn't check. Lazy or rushed, I don't know. I crawled out after his taillights disappeared and made it to the road." She swallowed hard. "I was trying to reach a relay point 60 miles south. Secure line, direct to the deputy director in Washington. Someone I trust." "You trust anyone right now?" "I trust that your dog didn't prey over a dead woman for no reason." That landed somewhere in Colton's chest that he didn't expect. He looked at Shadow, who was watching Sloane with those deep brown eyes that always seemed to understand more than any animal should. "Tell me about Hobbs," Colton said. Sloane's jaw tightened. Chief Warrant Officer Ray Hobbs, 15 years in Navy logistics, stationed at Stennis for the last 4. On paper, he coordinates supply shipments between the base and Gulf ports. In reality, he's the traffic controller for the entire corridor. Corridor? Magnolia Corridor. That's what they call it internally. Victims come through the port, mostly women and children. Central American, sometimes Eastern European. They're loaded into modified truck compartments and moved north through Mississippi and Alabama. Magnolia Freight handles the transport. Hobbs provides the military logistics cover. When a Magnolia truck runs alongside a Navy supply convoy, nobody asks questions. Nobody stops them. Nobody checks. Colton's stomach turned. He'd spent 12 years protecting this country from enemies overseas. The idea that the enemy was wearing the same uniform, driving the same roads, sleeping under the same flag, made something inside him go cold and still in a way that combat never had. "How many victims?" he asked. 40 confirmed on the SD card. That's just what I could document. The real number is higher. Much higher. And the company, Magnolia Freight? Owned by a man named Vernon Landry, Bayou Ridge businessman. Sponsors the town festival. Donates to the church. Coaches Little League. Sloane's lips twisted. He's the face. Hobbs is the machine. Together they've been running this thing for at least 3 years. And nobody noticed. People noticed. People always notice. But Landry's trucks pull over for stranded families in storms. His company hires local kids. His name is on the church bulletin every Sunday. Sloane's voice dropped to something raw. You don't question the man who tows your car out of a ditch at midnight. You thank him. You tell your neighbors. You build his reputation for him without ever knowing what's inside those trucks. Colton stood up and walked to the window. The bayou was black beyond the glass. No lights, no movement. Just rain and darkness and the heavy breathing of a wounded woman who'd been shot for telling the truth. There's a sheriff, Sloane said behind him. Dale Cutter, Bayou Ridge. I spent 3 months vetting him. Financial records clean. No suspicious contacts. No offshore accounts. His father was a Vietnam veteran who came home and spent 40 years doing honest work. You trust him? I trust his record. I trust that in 8 months of surveillance, he's the only badge in 3 counties I couldn't connect to Hobbs or Landry. She paused. That's not the same as trust, but it's close enough. Shadow suddenly rose. His whole body changed in a heartbeat, from calm to coiled, ears pinned, nose lifted. A growl started low in his chest, the kind that didn't come from fear, but from certainty. Colton killed the lantern. Darkness swallowed the cabin. He moved to the window, fingers already reaching for the knife on his belt, because his sidearm was in the truck, and he'd been too focused on Sloane to bring it inside. A light moved across the bayou. Slow. Sweeping. A spotlight on a boat, cutting through the rain in long arcs that touched the trees, the water, the edges of the bank. Searching. They're on the water, Colton whispered. Sloane didn't panic. She rolled off the cot onto the floor, biting down on a scream as her wound hit the boards. She pulled herself against the wall below the window line. Professional. Disciplined. Half dead and still moving like someone who had trained for exactly this. How far? She asked. 200 yards, moving east. The truck, is it hidden? Under cypress cover, no reflectors showing. The spotlight swept closer. It touched the tree line 50 yards from the cabin. Shadow's growl deepened, vibrating through the floorboards. Colton put his hand on the dog's back. Shadow went silent. The discipline between them was seamless, years of trust compressed into a single touch. The light paused on the water. Colton stopped breathing. Through the rain-streaked glass, he could see the outline of a flat-bottomed boat. 2 figures, one holding the spotlight, one driving. Then a voice crackled from the boat, distorted by distance and rain, but clear enough to catch. Southern grid clear. Push north. She can't have gotten far. The spotlight swept once more across the tree line, passed over the cabin's roof without stopping, and moved on. The engine sound faded. The darkness settled back in, like it had never been disturbed. Colton let out his breath. Shadow's body relaxed one muscle at a time, but neither of them moved from their positions for a full 2 minutes. Because in combat, and in the bayou, the second pass was always the one that killed you. When Colton finally relit the lantern, Sloane was on the floor with her back against the wall, her face white with pain, but her eyes absolutely alive. "They're organized," she said. "Grid search pattern. That means Hobbs is running this directly." "How many people does he have?" "Enough. Local contractors, Magnolia drivers, maybe a few deputies on payroll. He doesn't need an army. He just needs the right people in the right positions." Colton crouched beside her and opened the waterproof case from her jacket. The micro SD card sat inside, small enough to hide in a closed fist. 8 months of evidence, 40 lives documented. The entire Magnolia corridor mapped and recorded by a woman who had given up her name, her safety, and nearly her life to build a case that one phone call had destroyed. "I'm going to look at this," he said. "Use the laptop in my car kit. It's air-gapped, never been connected to any network." "Your car is a mile back on Route 49. "Under the passenger seat. Gray case, weatherproof." Colton looked at her, then at Shadow. The dog's ears were still rotating like satellites, tracking sounds too faint for human ears. "I'll go at first light," Colton said. "You're not moving." "Colton." Sloane's hand caught his arm. Her grip was weaker now, but her eyes held the same iron. "If something happens to me, you get that card to Dale Cutter. Not the FBI, not Stennis. Cutter. He's the only door that isn't locked from the inside. Nothing's happening to you. Promise me." Colton held her gaze. He thought about his team leader in Djibouti, the man who bled out in his arms while Colton promised him the same thing. Nothing's happening to you. He'd been wrong, man. The weight of that failure had lived in his chest for 2 years, like a stone he couldn't cough up. "I promise," he said. And this time, he meant it with something harder than hope. He meant it with the kind of fury that a man finds when he discovers the enemy isn't on the other side of the world. The enemy is right here, wearing the same flag, driving the same roads, hunting a woman who bled for the truth. Shadow lay down between them. His chin rested on Sloane's ankle, his body bridging the gap between the two humans who had been strangers 3 hours ago, and were now bound together by a bullet, a badge, and a prayer no one had taught a dog to make. Outside, the rain kept falling. The bayou held its breath. And somewhere on the dark water, a boat with a spotlight was circling back. Colton left before dawn. He told Sloane to stay flat, keep pressure on the wound, and not open the door for anything that didn't have 4 legs and a sable coat. Shadow stayed with her. The dog positioned himself between the cot and the door without being told, his brown eyes tracking Colton through the dark until the door closed. It took Colton 40 minutes on foot through knee-deep bayou water to reach Route 49. The rain had softened to a mist that clung to everything like a second skin. Sloane's car sat where she'd left it, caved in on the driver's side, nose buried in the culvert. The windshield was spider-cracked, blood on the seat, blood on the steering wheel. He found the gray case under the passenger seat. Weatherproof, air-gapped laptop inside, just like she said. He grabbed it and was about to leave when something stopped him. A tow truck was parked 200 yards up the road, engine off, lights off, sitting there like it had been waiting all night. The logo on the door was clean and professional. Magnolia Freight, Roadside Services. Colton crouched behind the wrecked sedan. His heart hammered once, hard, then went quiet the way it always did when his body shifted from man to operator. He watched the truck for 3 full minutes. No movement, No radio chatter. But the engine block was still ticking. Warm. Recent. Someone had driven that truck here, parked it, and walked away. Into the bayou, toward the same stretch of backcountry where Colton had hidden Sloan. He didn't run. Running made noise. He moved fast and low through the brush, carrying the laptop case against his chest, retracing his path with the kind of controlled urgency that 12 years of special operations had carved into his nervous system. 20 minutes in, he heard it. A branch snapping. Not wind, not animal. A boot on wet wood. Colton froze. Listened. Another step. Close. Maybe 40 yards to his left, moving parallel to his path. Someone was tracking the same route, heading toward the fishing camp. He changed direction, cut east, looped wide, added 15 minutes to his return, but came at the cabin from the backside, where the water was deepest and the cypress roots made a natural maze. When he reached the rear wall, he pressed his ear to the wood. Shadow was growling inside, low, controlled. The sound a trained military dog makes when he has identified a threat and is waiting for the command to act. Colton came through the back window. Sloan was on the floor, the kerosene lantern killed, her body pressed against the wall beneath the front window. She had a knife in her hand. Where she'd found it, Colton didn't know. "Someone's outside," she whispered. "I know. They left a truck on 49. One person on foot. Maybe more." "Did they follow you?" "No. They followed the same logic I did. Found your car, calculated the radius, started walking." A creak on the front porch. A single footstep. Then silence. Whoever it was, they were testing, listening, waiting for sound inside to confirm what they suspected. Shadow's growl dropped so low it was almost subsonic. His body was a loaded weapon. Teeth showed at the edge of his lips, white against the black of his muzzle. Colton touched the dog's flank. Hold. Another creak. Then a voice. Male. Calm. The kind of calm that came from doing ugly things so many times they'd stopped feeling ugly. "Agent Merritt." The voice carried through the thin cabin wall. "I know you're in there. The blood trail from your car doesn't lie." Sloane's face didn't change, but her grip on the knife tightened until her knuckles cracked. "My name is Briggs. I work for people who'd like this resolved quietly. You hand over the card, we call a medic, everybody goes home." Colton met Sloane's eyes. She shook her head. Not a negotiation. A trap. Colton already knew. Men who offered medics after midnight in the bayou weren't in the business of saving lives. "I'm going to open this door in 30 seconds, Briggs continued. His tone hadn't changed. Conversational. Patient. "I'd rather not make a mess, but I've got authorization to clean this up, however it needs cleaning." Colton moved to the side of the door. He positioned Shadow with a hand signal. The dog understood instantly. 8 years of working together meant Colton could speak in gestures and Shadow would hear paragraphs. 15 seconds, Agent Merritt." Colton held up 3 fingers to Shadow. 2. 1. He kicked the door open. Shadow launched through it like a missile made of muscle and fury. 90 pounds of German Shepherd hitting Briggs' center mass before the man could raise the pistol in his right hand. The gun discharged into the porch railing. Shadow's jaws locked onto the man's forearm, and Briggs screamed. Not the scream of a tough man playing injured, the real thing. The sound a human makes when an animal built for war decides the war has started. Colton was on him in 2 seconds. He drove Briggs face down into the wet porch boards, wrenched the pistol free, and pinned the man's arm behind his back at an angle that promised dislocation if he moved. Shadow. Out. The dog released. Blood ran from Briggs's forearm in thin lines. Shadow backed up 2 steps and sat, eyes locked on the man's face, body still vibrating with readiness. Briggs breathed hard against the wood. "You're military," he grunted. "You're observant." Colton pressed harder. "Who sent you?" "Go to hell." "Already there. Who sent you?" Briggs laughed. It was an ugly sound, wet and defiant. "You think this is one guy? You think you grab me and it stops? There are 6 more trucks on the road tonight. 6. Every one of them has a driver who knows what Agent Merritt looks like. You can't run far enough." Colton pulled a zip tie from his cargo pocket and bound the man's wrists. Then he dragged him inside, sat him against the wall, and crouched in front of him. Shadow positioned himself 6 inches from the man's face, breath hot, eyes unblinking. "Briggs," Colton said quietly, "I'm going to ask you questions. For every answer you give me, the dog stays where he is. For every answer you don't give me, I'm going to walk outside and let you 2 work it out alone. Understand?" Briggs looked at Shadow. The dog's lips peeled back slowly, revealing teeth that had been maintained by military veterinarians for the express purpose of moments exactly like this one. Briggs swallowed. "Hobbs sent me," he said. "How did he know she survived?" "The confirmation text. When it didn't come back answered, Hobbs activated the search. Boats on the water, trucks on the road, standard sweep." Sloan limped to the doorway, leaning on the frame. "How many people does Hobbs have on this?" Briggs looked at her. Recognition flickered. "You're smaller than your file photo. Answer the question." 12? Maybe 15? Mix of Magnolia drivers and local contractors. Plus 2 deputies on the Bayou Ridge Department who report directly to Hobbs." Sloan's face went still. "Which deputies?" "I don't know names. I know badges. Hobbs calls them his insurance policy." Colton stood up. "Where's Hobbs right now?" "Stennis. He doesn't leave the base during operations. Plausible deniability. He runs everything through encrypted radio and burner phones." "And Landry?" Briggs hesitated. Shadow leaned forward 1 inch. That was enough. "Landry's the money," Briggs said quickly. "He doesn't get his hands dirty. He funds the routes, owns the trucks, launders the cash through his freight contracts. But he doesn't touch the cargo. Ever. That's the deal. Hobbs handles the product. Landry handles the paper." "Product." Sloan's voice was ice. "They're human beings." Briggs looked at the floor. He didn't answer that. Maybe because he couldn't. Maybe because somewhere under the ugliness, a nerve still worked. Colton pulled Sloan aside. They spoke in whispers while Shadow kept watch over Briggs with the patient intensity of a creature that had all night and absolutely no intention of sleeping. "We need Cutter," Colton said. "Now. Today. If Hobbs has deputies inside the department, then we don't go to the department. We go to Cutter's house, before shift, before he puts on the uniform and walks into a building where 2 of his own people are working for the enemy." Sloan leaned against the wall. Pain radiated from her side, but she pushed through it with the stubbornness of a woman who had spent 8 months pretending to be someone else and had nothing left to lose by being herself. "Cutter's place is 20 minutes from here," she said. "If he's who I think he is, he'll move fast. If he's not, we'll know in the first 30 seconds. "How?" "Because an honest man's face can't hide what it feels when you tell him children are being trafficked through his town." Colton looked at her. For a moment, he saw past the wound, past the blood, past the 8 months of undercover work that had hollowed her out. He saw someone who still believed that good people existed, that telling the truth to the right person could still change something. It was the kind of faith that should have been naive, but wasn't, because she'd earned it the hardest way possible. "Okay," he said. "We drive to Cutter." He secured Briggs to a support beam with zip ties and duct tape. The man wouldn't be going anywhere. Colton left water within reach because he wasn't the kind of man who let someone die of thirst, even someone who hunted women for a living. Shadow jumped into the truck first. Sloane moved slowly, each step costing her, but she refused Colton's arm until she absolutely couldn't. She got in the back seat, pressed the laptop case against her chest, and closed her eyes. "Colton," she said as he started the engine. "Yeah?" "If Cutter's house is being watched, we can't stop. We drive through and keep going." "I know." "And if we keep going, there's nowhere left. Hobbs will have every road, every bridge, every hospital." "I know that too." Sloane opened her eyes. "So what's the plan if Cutter doesn't work out?" Colton looked at Shadow in the passenger seat. The dog's ears were forward, eyes on the road, body ready. Then he looked at Sloane in the mirror. Broken, bleeding, still fiving. "Then I drive to Stennis myself," Colton said. "And I walk into Hobbs's office, and I end this the way I was trained to." Sloane stared at him. "You'd throw away your career, your life." 40 people, Sloane. Women and children. My career can burn." The truck pulled out of the bayou and turned north toward Bayou Ridge. Behind them, Briggs sat in the dark cabin, tied to a beam, listening to the engine fade. Ahead of them, a town slept peacefully under the name of a man who funded its festivals with money made from human suffering. And in the passenger seat, Shadow pressed his front paws together one more time. Not pleading, not praying for rescue, praying for justice. The kind that doesn't come from heaven. The kind that good people drag into the light with their bare and bloody hands. Dale Cutter was sitting on his front porch with a shotgun across his knees and a cup of coffee going cold in his hand when Colton's truck pulled into the driveway. The old sheriff didn't stand up. He didn't reach for the gun. He just watched the truck with the steady patience of a man who had been expecting trouble to find him eventually, and had made peace with the appointment. Colton stepped out first. His Navy uniform was still damp, mud-streaked, the digital camouflage looking like it had been through exactly the kind of night it was designed for. Shadow jumped down beside him, ears forward, assessing the man on the porch with the same focus he gave every unknown variable. Cutter's eyes moved from Colton to the dog to the backseat of the truck where Sloane was struggling to sit up. His jaw tightened. "You want to tell me why there's a bleeding woman in your truck, son?" Cutter said. His voice was low and rough, the kind of voice that had given orders for 30 years and never needed to raise its volume. "She's FBI," Colton said. "She was shot and left for dead on Route 49 last night. Someone's been trafficking human beings through your county, using Magnolia Freight as cover. And the Navy officer named Ray Hobbs is running the operation from Stennis." Colton watched Cutter's face. Sloane had said an honest man couldn't hide what he felt when he heard children were being moved through his town. She was right. Cutter's expression didn't crack. It ignited. Something behind those weathered eyes caught fire in a way that had nothing to do with anger, and everything to do with the kind of rage that only decent men carry when they discover evil has been living in their backyard. Cutter set down his coffee. "Get her inside." He didn't ask for credentials. He didn't call dispatch. He helped Colton carry Sloane into his kitchen, cleared the table with one sweep of his arm, and laid her down on it like it was a field hospital. He had a first aid kit under the sink that was better stocked than most ambulances. "I was a combat medic, son," Cutter said when Colton looked surprised. "My daddy taught me 2 things: shoot straight and patch what's bleeding." While Cutter cleaned Sloane's wound with hands that were rough but careful, Colton opened the air-gapped laptop and loaded the micro SD card. The files came up fast. shipping manifests with dates and routes, financial transfers linking shell companies to Magnolia Freight's accounts, GPS logs showing trucks detouring at 3 in the morning to isolated properties with no business receiving cargo. And photographs. Sloan had taken photographs. Cutter looked at the screen over his shoulder. His hands stopped moving. For 5 seconds, the kitchen was silent, except for Sloan's breathing and Shadow's nails clicking on the tile floor. "How long?" Cutter asked. His voice had changed, quieter, dangerous. "At least 3 years," Sloan said from the table, eyes closed against the pane. 40 confirmed victims. The real number is much higher. Vernon Landry. Cutter said the name like he was pulling a splinter from his own skin. "He sits in my church. He sponsored the department's Christmas drive last year. His trucks pull over for stranded families." "That's the point," Sloan said. "That's how it works. You build trust so no one ever looks underneath." Cutter walked to the window. He stood there for a long moment. When he turned back, his face had settled into something Colton recognized. Resolution. The look a man gets when the path forward is ugly, but the path backward doesn't exist. "You said Hobbs has deputies on my department," Cutter said. "2, Sloan confirmed. "I don't know which ones." "I do." Cutter's voice was flat. "Tyler Ames and Rick Dawson. They've been taking extra shifts for the last 2 years. Always volunteering for overnight road patrol. I thought they were ambitious." He paused. "I was a fool." "You weren't a fool," Colton said. "You trusted your people. That's not weakness." "It is when people die because of it." Cutter grabbed his badge from the counter. He pinned it to his chest with the deliberate slowness of a man who understood the weight of what it represented. "What do you need from me?" "A checkpoint," Sloan said. "Legal, documented, justified. Hobbs has trucks moving tonight. If we can intercept one, we can break the chain." "Where?" "The bridge on Highway 12. Only route into Bayou Ridge from the south. Every Magnolia truck crosses it." Cutter nodded. "I've got 4 deputies I'd trust with my life. I'll leave Ames and Dawson off the call. If they find out, then they find out, and we deal with it. I'm not asking permission to protect my town from men who sell children." Cutter looked at Shadow, who was sitting by the kitchen door with his paws crossed, watching the conversation like a juror weighing testimony. "Your dog always this calm?" "Only when he trusts the room," Colton said. Cutter almost smiled. Almost. Smart animal. He made one phone call. Not to his department, to a federal judge named William Oakes, who he'd known since law school. Colton listened to one side of the conversation. Cutter's voice was steady, factual, and devastating. Within 20 minutes, Judge Oakes issued emergency warrants by phone, with written confirmation to follow. Then Cutter called his 4 trusted deputies. He told them to meet at the Highway 12 bridge in 40 minutes. No radio. Personal phones only. He didn't explain why. Good deputies didn't need explanations when their sheriff's voice sounded like that. Colton turned to Sloan. "You're staying here." "No." "You can barely stand." "I can sit in a truck and monitor their communications. I've been listening to Magnolia's private radio channels for 8 months. I know their call signs, their codes, their patterns. You need me." Colton looked at Cutter. The sheriff shrugged. "She's FBI. It's her case. I'm not going to be the one to tell her no." Sloan swung her legs off the table and stood up. She swayed once. Shadow pressed against her leg, steadying her. She looked down at the dog, and something passed between them that Colton couldn't name. Gratitude. Recognition. The silent bond between 2 creatures who refused to quit. They drove to the bridge in 2 vehicles. Cutter's cruiser led. Colton's truck followed, with Sloan in the back seat and Shadow in the front, his attention fixed on every vehicle they passed. The 4 deputies were already waiting. Colton sized them up fast. 3 men, 1 woman. All young. All nervous. All looking at their sheriff like he was about to tell them the world was different than they thought. Cutter didn't waste words. "We're setting up a legal checkpoint. Severe weather road safety protocol. Every vehicle gets stopped and checked. If a Magnolia freight truck comes through, you hold it. You search it. You follow procedure to the letter, because what we find tonight is going to court, and I will not lose this case to a sloppy stop." Deputy Eli Mercer, the youngest, raised his hand. "Sheriff, what are we looking for?" Cutter looked at him hard. "The worst thing you've ever imagined, and I need you ready for it." They set the checkpoint at the narrowest point of the bridge. 2 cruisers with amber lights, reflective cones. Legal, visible, professional. Shadow sat beside Cutter's cruiser, calm as stone, watching the road with the patience of an animal who understood that hunting required stillness before the strike. Sloan sat in Colton's truck, with the laptop open, the radio scanner active, monitoring Magnolia's private frequency. She heard them before anyone saw them. "Raven to North Star," a voice crackled. "Southbound clear. Packages rolling." Sloan leaned forward. "Colton, truck inbound. 2 minutes." Colton relayed to Cutter. The sheriff positioned himself at the checkpoint line. His deputies spread to their marks. Everything was calm. Everything was professional. And underneath it, every heart was pounding. Headlights appeared on the bridge. A Magnolia freight tow truck rolled forward, amber bar light blinking in that friendly rhythm designed to make stranded drivers feel safe. The logo on the door gleamed in the checkpoint lights. Clean, trustworthy, the perfect lie. Cutter stepped forward. "Evening, county checkpoint, visibility protocol, license and work order." The driver lowered his window. Mid-30s, thick neck, trimmed beard, reflective jacket. His smile came fast, practiced, and died at the edges. His eyes were too sharp for a routine stop. "Sheriff Cutter," the driver said, like he knew the name, like he'd been told to know it. "License and work order," Cutter repeated. He didn't flinch. He didn't blink. The driver handed over papers. Mercer leaned in, his brow furrowed. Something wrong with the formatting. Small, almost invisible. But Mercer was the kind of young deputy who noticed what others overlooked. A radio squelch chirped from the truck's cab. 1 clipped syllable, then silence. Shadow's head snapped up so fast, Mercer stumbled back. The dog's entire body locked. Not barking. Not growling. Recognition. "You running comms tonight?" Cutter asked casually. "Standard company channel," the driver said. "Just coordinating routes." "Step out for me." The driver hesitated. Half a heartbeat. In law enforcement, half a heartbeat was a confession. He stepped down. Shadow moved with purpose, ignoring the man entirely, circling to the truck's undercarriage. His nose worked the seams in short, controlled bursts. Then he went still. 1 sharp bark. An alert. Mercer crouched with his flashlight. "Sheriff?" His voice was tight, barely holding. "There's a sealed compartment behind the toolbox bracket. Modified. Welded in. Photograph it. Glove up. Bag it." The driver's shoulders tensed, his hands flexed. Cutter's voice dropped 1 degree. "Don't." They opened the compartment. Sealed pouches, falsified pharmaceutical labels, and underneath, documents that detailed pickup points, delivery schedules, and names. Not the names of packages, the names of people. The driver broke in 4 minutes. Colton had seen captured operators hold out for hours under pressure. This man folded like a card table. Because the thing about men who do evil for money is that loyalty evaporates the instant the money stops protecting them. "Hobbs runs everything," the driver said, wrists cuffed behind his back. "He's at Stennis right now. He never leaves the base during operations." "And Landry?" Cutter asked. "Landry's the bank. He doesn't touch cargo, ever. That's the arrangement." Sloane listened from the truck, recording everything on the air-gapped laptop. Her face was gray with pain and something worse. 8 months of her life confirmed in the panicked confession of a man who had driven human beings like freight. Then the radio scanner crackled. A new voice. Not Raven, not North Star. Deeper, controlled. The voice of command. "All units, abort southbound. Checkpoint is compromised. Switch to secondary. Repeat, secondary route active." Sloane grabbed Colton's arm through the truck window. "They know. Someone tipped them." Cutter heard it too. His face went volcanic. He keyed his personal phone and called dispatch. "Where are Deputies Ames and Dawson right now?" The answer came back in 10 seconds. "Off duty. Left the station 40 minutes ago. Personal vehicles. No destination logged." Cutter closed his eyes for 1 second. When he opened them, the man standing on the bridge was not the same sheriff who had been drinking coffee on his porch 2 hours ago. This was the son of a combat veteran. The man who had worn a badge for 22 years and never once let it mean less than everything. "Mercer," he said, "take 2 units to the Magnolia Freight Warehouse on the waterfront. Emergency authority. Judge Oakes signed it. You go in clean, you document everything, and you do not let anyone leave that building." "Yes, sir." "I'm going to Stennis." Cutter looked at Colton. "You're coming with me." "Stennis is a military installation. You can't—" "I have a federal warrant, a wounded FBI agent, and a recorded confession from a man who just told me a Navy officer is running a trafficking ring off government property. I can walk through any gate I want." Colton stared at him. Then he nodded, because Cutter was right, and because some doors don't open with rank or protocol. They open with the kind of righteous fury that no guard post in the world is designed to stop. They left Mercer at the bridge with the arrested driver. Sloane stayed in the truck. Shadow rode between Colton and Cutter in the cruiser, his body tense, his eyes forward, his paws pressed together once in the dashboard light. Cutter drove fast. The road to Stennis Space Center was 40 minutes of dark highway and silence. Neither man spoke. They didn't need to. The evidence spoke. The confession spoke. 40 names on a micro SD card spoke louder than anything either of them could say. At the gate, Cutter showed his badge, the federal warrant, and the face of a man who had run out of patience for every lie the world had tried to sell him. They found Hobbs in his office, sitting behind a desk, calm, a briefcase open beside him. He looked up when the door opened and saw a county sheriff, a Navy SEAL in a mud-soaked combat uniform, and a German shepherd whose eyes held the kind of judgment that no rank could deflect. "Chief Warrant Officer Hobbs," Cutter said, "you're under arrest." Hobbs leaned back, smiled, the practiced smile of a man who had prepared for this conversation. "Sheriff, I think you're confused. Whatever you've been told." 40 people, Colton said. He stepped forward. Shadow stepped with him. "Women and children. 3 years. You used Navy logistics to move human cargo, and you let a good woman get shot on a highway because she found out." Hobbs' smile didn't crack, but his eyes changed. The pupils contracted. The mask slipped for 1/10 of a second, and behind it, Colton saw something that made his blood go cold. Not guilt. Calculation. Hobbs was already running numbers, already weighing exits, already thinking about who he could burn to save himself. "I want my lawyer," Hobbs said. Cutter nodded to the military police who had followed them in. "Cuff him." The handcuffs clicked. The sound echoed in the small office like a period at the end of a sentence that had taken 3 years to write. Hobbs looked at Colton as they walked him out. "You're a SEAL. You understand orders. You understand the chain. This is bigger than you think, sailor. Bigger than a county sheriff and a wounded agent." Colton didn't flinch. "I stopped for a dog. The dog led me to a woman. The woman led me to you. I don't need to understand how big it is. I just needed to find the next door. And every door led here." Shadow sat at Colton's feet. For one quiet moment, the dog pressed his paws together, not pleading, not asking for rescue, accepting something. The weight of what had been done, and the promise of what still remained. Because as Hobbs was loaded into the vehicle, Sloane's voice came through Colton's phone. Thin, tired, unbreakable. "Colton, the second encrypted file on the card. I cracked it while you were inside." A pause. "Hobbs isn't the top. He's the field commander. There's someone above him who authorized every shipment, every route, every payment. And his voice is on the recording." "Whose voice?" Sloane breathed once. "Vernon Landry." Colton looked toward Bayou Ridge. Somewhere out there, a man who coached Little League and sponsored church picnics was sleeping peacefully, believing his name was still clean, believing the smile he wore to town festivals would protect him forever. Shadow's ears turned toward the same darkness. His body was still. His eyes were steady, and his paws pressed together one final time, not in prayer for mercy, but in prayer for the strength to finish what the bayou had started. 1 week changed Bayou Ridge the way a single match changes a house. From the outside, everything still looked the same, but the foundation had shifted, and the people who lived inside could feel it in their bones. Mercer's team had hit the Magnolia Freight warehouse within an hour of the bridge checkpoint. What they found inside shut down every deputy who walked through that door for days afterward. Cots, restraints, transport containers modified with ventilation holes drilled at child height. A staging area where human beings had been stored like inventory, cataloged by number, sorted by destination. Mercer, the youngest deputy on Cutter's force, walked out of that warehouse, sat on the bumper of his cruiser, and cried. He was 26 years old, and he told Cutter later that he'd aged 10 years in 10 minutes. Deputies Ames and Dawson were picked up trying to cross the state line into Alabama. They had cash, burner phones, and a Magnolia Freight radio in the trunk. When Cutter's people pulled them over, Dawson tried to talk his way out. Ames didn't say a word. He just stared at the dashboard like a man watching his life collapse in real time, and knowing he deserved every second of it. Sloane's evidence reached Washington through the channel she'd always intended. Not her compromised field office. Not the chain that had betrayed her. A secure line to the deputy director, arranged through Judge Oakes and routed through military encryption that Colton provided from his own training network. Within 48 hours, a federal task force was assembled. Not local, national. The kind of team that didn't answer to anyone who might have a reason to make things disappear. The task force arrived in Bayou Ridge on a Monday. 12 agents, 3 vehicles, no sirens. They set up in the back room of the county courthouse, while Cutter stood guard at the door, like a man who had decided that nothing was getting past him, ever again. Sloane briefed them from a wheelchair. She'd refused a hospital bed until the briefing was complete, and the lead agent, a veteran named Torres, who had worked trafficking cases for 20 years, told Colton afterward that he'd never seen someone deliver intelligence that clean while running a fever of 102. The second encrypted file on the micro SD card was the killing blow. Sloane had cracked it using a cipher key hidden in the metadata of one of Hobbs's shipping manifests. Inside were audio recordings, 23 minutes of Vernon Landry's voice, authorizing shipments, discussing prices, negotiating delivery windows for human beings with the same casual efficiency a man might use to schedule a furniture delivery. His voice was unmistakable. His words were devastating. And his casual laughter at the 11-minute mark, when someone on the call mentioned a shipment that included minors, would play in a courtroom one day and end every lie he had ever built. But they didn't arrest Landry on Monday. Torres wanted the net complete. Every connection, every account, every name in the chain from the port to the final destination. Rush it, and lawyers would find gaps. Patience would put Landry in a cell. Impatience would put him on a plea deal. Colton understood patience. He'd spent hours in hide positions overseas, waiting for a single target to cross a single window. But this was different. The target wasn't overseas. The target was walking around Bayou Ridge, shaking hands and smiling at children. And every hour he stayed free felt like an insult to the 40 names on Sloane's card. The Shrimp Festival arrived on Saturday like it did every year. Bayou Ridge dressed itself up in string lights and good intentions, and the whole town came out to eat and dance and pretend the world was kind. Colton moved through the crowd in civilian clothes, jeans, boots, a plain jacket that hid the tension in his shoulders. Shadow walked beside him, calm and steady, his tan and black coat catching the golden light. People stopped to pet the dog. Shadow allowed it, with the dignified patience of a soldier at a parade. But his eyes never stopped moving. He tracked every face, every hand, every shift in the crowd's energy. 8 years of training didn't take a night off because someone was playing fiddle music. Sloane was there too, hat pulled low, coat buttoned high, moving through the crowd like a woman deciding whether she wanted shrimp or gumbo. But her eyes were doing what they'd always done, measuring, remembering, building a case with every glance. She found Landry near the Magnolia freight banner. He was exactly where she expected him to be, at the center, shaking hands, smiling that smile, the one that arrived on time and left on time and never once reached his eyes. He was talking to a group of locals, telling a story about pulling a family out of a ditch during last year's hurricane. The crowd loved it. They laughed. They patted his arm. They looked at him like he was the best thing about their town. Sloane's stomach burned. Not from the wound, from the knowledge that every dollar funding this festival, every light hanging from every post, every plate of free food being served to families with children, was paid for with money made from selling people who looked just like the people eating off those plates. She didn't approach him. Not yet. Torres had been clear. Observe. Document. Let the net finish closing. But Colton couldn't help himself. He walked past Landry's booth with Shadow at his heel, casual, unhurried. Landry noticed the dog, and his face lit up with that practiced warmth. "Beautiful shepherd," Landry said, reaching out. Shadow didn't growl. He didn't show teeth. He looked at Landry with those deep brown eyes, and something in that gaze made the man's hands stop in midair. Dogs don't lie. They don't perform politics. They see what's underneath. And whatever Shadow saw underneath Vernon Landry made the animal go perfectly, absolutely still. Landry pulled his hand back. His smile flickered. Just a fraction. Just enough for Colton to see the man behind the mask register something he probably hadn't felt in years. Being seen. "Friendly dog?" Landry asked, and his voice was lighter than it should have been. Forced. "He's particular," Colton said. "He only trusts people who deserve it." Landry laughed. Too quick. Too loud. He turned back to his crowd, and Colton walked on. But in the space between one heartbeat and the next, something had shifted. A crack in the foundation, a tremor that only the people paying attention could feel. Cutter found Colton at the pier an hour later. The sheriff was eating a plate of jambalaya like a man who hadn't eaten in a week, which he probably hadn't. "Torres called," Cutter said between bites. "Task Force finalized the warrant package this afternoon. Bank records, shell companies, port contacts. Everything." "When?" "Monday morning, 7 a.m. Federal agents at his home, state police at Magnolia Freight Headquarters, NCIS at Stennis to sweep Hobbs's network on the base." Cutter set down his fork. 47 charges: trafficking, conspiracy, money laundering, RICO. Colton let the number sit. 47 charges. 3 years of evil, distilled into legal language that would stand in front of a jury. It wasn't justice yet. Justice would come when the verdict landed. But it was the closest thing to hope that 40 victims had been given since the first truck rolled. "The leak in Sloane's field office?" Colton asked. "Her handler, a man named Corrigan. Internal Affairs picked him up Thursday. He'd been taking payments through his wife's real estate business for 2 years. When they showed him the evidence, he asked for a deal before they finished reading him his rights." Cutter shook his head. 20 years in the Bureau, and he sold out a woman who trusted him for $60,000. "That's the price?" "That's always the price. Cheaper than you think. That's what makes it ugly." Sloane appeared at the edge of the pier. She moved slowly, the wound still pulling at her. But she walked under her own power, and she walked straight. Shadow went to her before Colton could. The dog pressed his head against her thigh and held it there, a weight that was both comfort and anchor. Sloane looked down at him and put her hand on his broad skull. "You started all of this," she said quietly. "You and your ridiculous prayer." Shadow's tail moved. Not a wag, a slow, deliberate sweep. Acknowledgement. Colton stood beside her. Their shoulders almost touched. "How do you feel?" he asked. "Like someone who's about to watch the right thing happen for once." She paused. "And terrified it won't stick." "It'll stick. Torres doesn't lose cases. Cutter doesn't lose evidence. And you didn't survive a bullet to the gut and 8 months undercover to watch a jury let this go." Sloane looked at him. For the first time since he'd found her bleeding in a ditch, something in her face softened. Not weakness. Release. The kind of exhale a person takes when they realize they've been holding their breath for so long they forgot what breathing felt like. "Colton." "Yeah. Thank you for stopping." He thought about that night on Route 49. The rain, the dark, Shadow rising in the passenger seat, paws pressed together, begging him to see what God had put in his path. He could have driven past. He could have called 911 and kept going. He could have decided that whatever was lying in that ditch was someone else's problem. But Shadow had prayed, and Colton had listened. And every door that opened after that moment led to this one. "I didn't stop," Colton said. "Shadow did. I just followed." Across the festival, Landry was laughing with the mayor. His banner glowed behind him. His name was on the program. His reputation was still intact for 2 more days, and he had no idea that come Monday morning, every door in his life would close at the same time and never open again. Shadow sat between Colton and Sloane at the edge of the water. The festival played behind them. Music, laughter, the sound of a town that didn't yet know how close it had come to being consumed by the evil it had been thanking by name for 3 years. The dog lifted his paws, slowly, deliberately, pressed them together, held them. Not begging this time, not pleading for help or urging someone to act. This was different. This was gratitude. The prayer of a creature who had done the only thing he knew how to do, and watched it become something bigger than instinct. Something that looked, from the outside, like grace. Colton put his hand on Shadow's back. Sloane put her hand beside his, and for a moment, the three of them held still, while the world moved around them, bound together by a bullet, a badge, a prayer, and the stubborn refusal to leave someone dying on the road when every easy choice said drive on. Monday came. The arrests came. The headlines came. And the 40 names on Sloane Merritt's micro SD card stopped being case numbers and started being people again. People with faces and families and futures that had been stolen by men in clean clothes with friendly smiles, who believed they would never be caught because nobody ever stops for a dying woman on a dark road in the rain. But somebody did, because a dog prayed and a sailor listened, and that was enough. Sometimes God doesn't send angels with wings and trumpets. He sends a man in a muddy uniform with a tired heart and a dog who learned to put his paws together when the world was falling apart. The miracle isn't loud. It's a pause, a choice. A moment when something inside you says stop, and you obey it, even when you don't understand why. If you're carrying your own storm tonight, if grief has made the road too dark to see, if you've been running so long you've forgotten why you started, remember this. You don't have to see the whole road. You just have to stop when something says stop. Trust the nudge. Follow the prayer you can't put into words. Because the help you need might be standing right there in the dark, waiting for you to notice. Be the one who stops. Be the one who checks on the neighbor. Be the one who listens when the world says keep driving. Someone out there is praying for exactly the kind of help you're able to give. If this story touched your heart, share it with someone who could use a little hope today. Tell me in the comments where you're watching from and which part of the story stayed with you the most. Subscribe for more stories of faith, courage, and quiet miracles. May the Lord bless and keep you. May He protect your home, strengthen your heart, and guide your steps through every storm, until the light that always follows finally breaks through. Amen.